Hey guys, tonight we journey into a world you think you know, but trust me, you don't. You've heard the stories, corsets, tea dances, love letters written by candlelight. But Victorian dating wasn't a series of slow-motion walks through rose gardens. It was a game of rules, repression, and romantic survival, played in silence, supervised from the drapes, and wrapped in enough social anxiety to fuel several lifetimes of novels. So, before we lace up our boots and head into the foggy streets of the 19th century, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, what time is it where you are right now? I love hearing where in the world you're watching from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum in the background. Wrap yourself in something cozy. Maybe something flannel, in the spirit of the era. And let's slip together into tonight's story, tonight's journey. What Victorian dating was really like. Now forget what the movies told you. Victorian courtship wasn't a dreamy haze of suitors and symphonies. It was a slow-motion negotiation between families, reputations, and unspoken expectations. You didn't just meet someone. You met their chaperone, their mother, their father, their family doctor, and probably their distant cousin who once held a minor position in the East India Company. A single glance could mean everything, or nothing. A dropped handkerchief, potential marriage proposal, a smile across the room, scandal. And heaven forbid you spoke first. The rules were ironclad, unspoken, and absurdly delicate. It was a social minefield wrapped in lace. But as strange and rigid as it all was, it was also strangely human. Beneath the starch and etiquette were people, flawed, hopeful, awkward people, trying to connect in a world that didn't always allow them to. And so tonight, that's what we'll explore. Not the ballrooms and novels, but the lived experience of Victorian romance. From the moment you open your eyes in a scratchy canopy bed to the evening dance where you're allowed, finally, to brush someone's glove for precisely 2 seconds before being whisked away. We're going to walk you through every step. The waking discomfort, the morning rituals, the stiff collars and tighter corsets, the family breakfast where no one says what they mean, the elaborate system of flirtation by fan, by flower, by silence, the dances, the letters, the whispers, and of course, the rules. So many rules. This isn't just a history of love. It's a survival guide for dating in a time when a wink could ruin you, and a misplaced compliment might mean exile to a cousin's country estate in Dorset. So, lay back. Let your mind wander through cobblestone streets and flickering gas lamps. We'll move slow, steady, and soft, like a horse-drawn carriage through the evening mist. Because tonight, you're not swiping. You're navigating the endless unspoken codes of Victorian romance. And trust me, there is no app for this. This is love the 19th century way. Awkward, repressed, and absolutely exhausting. You wake to the sound of horse hooves clopping on damp cobblestone, the slow rattle of a milk cart passing under your window, and the low, patient hum of a gas lamp still burning in the corner. It's morning, technically, but in this world, it doesn't arrive gently. The cold hits first. Not a breeze, not a chill, a presence. heavy and damp, as if the very walls of your room are soaked in fog. You don't get out of bed because you want to. You get out because the bed has stopped being a sanctuary and started becoming a meat locker. Your bed is large but not luxurious. You're in the guest room of a well-to-do Victorian home, which means the mattress is horsehair stuffed into something pretending to be a cushion. The sheets are stiff, not crisp, stiff, as though they've been boiled, starched, and folded into the same rectangle since the Crimean War. You can feel every seam, every bit of binding, thread, and weight pressing against you like a distant aunt's disapproval. The blanket smells like camphor and mildew. The pillow has given up entirely, flattened by decades of polite, restrained sleep. The wallpaper is floral, not a fun floral, a dead floral, beige on beige, bleeding slightly at the edges from too many damp winters and not enough ventilation. A faded oil painting of someone's grandfather stares at you from across the room, his expression somewhere between disappointment and gout. You sit up, slowly. Every joint protests. It's not that you're old. It's that the air is. It clings to your clothes, your lungs, your soul. Victorian mornings are not designed for comfort. They are designed for discipline. There's a fireplace across the room, but it's long gone cold. No servant has come to light it yet. You have no matches. You have no choice. You shuffle to the edge of the bed and slip your feet into slippers that feel like cardboard wrapped in regret. The floorboards groan loudly. They announce you like a town crier. Every step is a declaration of movement, a warning to anyone within earshot that yes, you are up, and no, you are not happy about it. The curtains are thick and stubborn. They don't glide. They don't open. They resist. When you finally wrestle them aside, the light that filters in is not golden. It's gray. London gray. Industrial Revolution gray. The sky outside is the exact color of boiled mutton. You can just make out the smokestacks in the distance. Someone's burning coal. Someone's always burning coal. Below, the street is alive with early motion. A boy in a flat cap delivers bread from a wicker basket. A woman in a black bonnet scolds a child for stepping in horse dung. A constable adjusts his gloves and does nothing else. Welcome to your morning view. The room is freezing. The water jug on your nightstand has a thin layer of ice forming around the rim. The matching porcelain basin is ready for you to splash yourself awake. There is no sink, no mirror, no toothbrush, just cold water, cracked soap, and a towel that smells faintly of mothballs and hard decisions. Your reflection stares back from the cloudy glass of the window. Your hair is a mess. Your skin is pale. You have the general appearance of someone who spent the night fighting a moral crisis in a Bronte novel. And now comes the worst part: changing. Victorian modesty says you should not be seen in your nightclothes, which is fine because no one is here to see you, but you see you, and even that is almost too much. Your nightshirt is ankle length and oddly scratchy. It's made of flannel or linen, hard to tell, but it's certainly not soft. It's functional, shapeless, and smells of starch. You peel it off like removing the outer layer of a sad onion and reach for your underthings. Because yes, before breakfast, before even a whisper of romance, you must armor yourself in layers. Chemise, corset or stays, depending on the year. Petticoats, stockings, garters. And that's just the base level. If you're a gentleman, you're not off the hook. Your morning involves stiff collars, too short trousers, and a waistcoat that looks elegant but feels like being slowly embraced by a velvet vice. There's a bell pull in the corner of the room. Decorative, not functional. If you want help dressing, you'd need a lady's maid or a valet. But you're not the lord or lady of the house. You're the guest, a courtesy guest, possibly a cousin, which means you dress yourself badly. The corset strings tangle. The buttons resist. Everything takes twice as long and hurts more than expected. You are slowly being trussed up like an emotional ham, and still you must hurry. You are expected downstairs at a certain time. Not on the dot. Victorians didn't do punctuality the way we do. But you must never be late enough to be noticed or early enough to seem overeager. You must appear precisely when it is most appropriate, which of course no one tells you. Outside the bedroom, you hear the creak of the stair railing, the slow, careful shuffle of the housemaid laying the fire in the drawing room. A quiet cough from somewhere down the hall. A clock chimes. It's likely only 7. But in this world, 7 is midday for the respectable. You open the door. The hallway is cold, dark, and smells faintly of coal dust and lavender polish. The carpet is worn in a way that speaks of generations. At the end of the hall, a faded portrait of Queen Victoria gazes sternly across the landing, as if silently judging your choice in stockings. And so, wrapped in wool, slightly damp from the morning wash, and fully imprisoned in your own clothing, you descend the stairs to meet the day. A day filled with unspoken rules, silent glances, and the exhausting business of trying to fall in love without ever admitting it out loud. Your hands are cold. Your shoes pinch. Your breath fogs the air as you walk. And this is just the beginning. The staircase groans beneath your steps as you make your way down. The air is no warmer on the ground floor, just less lonely. The smell hits first, a blend of coal smoke, something vaguely edible, and that ever-present scent of old wood and damp wallpaper paste. It's morning in Victorian England, and that means one thing. You're about to eat something that hates you. The dining room is dim, lit by the weak gray fingers of daylight, and a few gas sconces hissing gently against the walls. You pass the parlor, where no one sits, and the drawing room, where a fireplace reluctantly crackles to life under the supervision of a housemaid who looks both cold and unimpressed. You're not in a hotel. You're in someone's home. A respectable home, yes, but respectability doesn't make toast any warmer. It doesn't make the butter less gray. You enter the breakfast room, an uncomfortably formal place that insists, without ever saying so, that you do not linger. The table is laid in full Victorian splendor, which is to say, far too much tableware for far too little food. Dozens of utensils, each with its own strange shape and silent judgment. Forks that look like surgical instruments. Spoons the size of baby bats. Butter knives, fish knives, bone-handled serving forks you are definitely not meant to touch. Every piece perfectly placed, and none of it capable of delivering a satisfying meal. The toast sits in a silver rack. That's right, a rack, not a plate. Toast, in the Victorian world, is not allowed to remain warm or soft. It must stand upright, exposed to the chill, until it crisps into a dry, brittle apology. The butter is pale, slightly translucent, and somehow already firm enough to destroy the toast you are meant to spread it on. There's a dish of kippers, salted, smoked herring, curling gently in their own oil like someone left them out as a warning. They smell like regret. If you breathe through your mouth, it's tolerable. Barely. There may be eggs. If the household is upper middle class, perhaps even a little ham. But don't get excited. The eggs are gray around the edges. The ham is mostly fat. Everything tastes like it's been sitting under a bell jar for 2 hours. Which, to be fair, it has. There's no coffee. Not really. Not unless you're in a particularly forward-thinking or European-influenced home. Tea is the standard here. Black, strong, boiled to oblivion. It is served in delicate china cups so thin they tremble in your hand. You're not allowed to slurp, or blow on it, or comment on the flavor, which tastes like burnt leaves and judgment. Conversation at breakfast is minimal. You may greet your host, nod at a cousin, exchange a few words about the weather or the newspaper, if you are of the right class and gender to be reading one. Romance? Not here. Not yet. You're not supposed to speak to anyone too kindly before midday, lest it be mistaken for interest. And interest, before the correct number of visits and references, is social catastrophe. So you chew silently, carefully, and dream of butter that spreads. Now hygiene. After breakfast, the household scatters. Gentlemen retire to the study or stroll to their club. Ladies begin their day's delicate balancing act of embroidery, letter writing, and silent suffering in overly tight shoes. But before any of this, there's one final, important ritual: washing, but not bathing. No. Not full-body bathing is a rare event in the Victorian world. Not unheard of, but not common. A proper bath takes time. It takes effort. It takes servants, kettles, and the patience of saints. So most mornings you perform what is delicately called a sponge wash. There's a jug and basin in your room. You return after breakfast to find it refilled with lukewarm water, though lukewarm in Victorian England generally means almost cold, but not icy enough to be considered an insult. The water smells faintly of metal and soap. The soap is a rough block of brown or yellow tallow, animal fat mixed with ash, sometimes perfumed with lavender if your host is particularly generous. You dip your sponge, coarse, smelly, and questionably clean, into the basin, and then, like a sad medieval monk, you begin your ablutions. Face, neck, behind the ears, arms, chest. Anything lower is technically private, and thus washed with either supreme discretion or not at all. Your teeth? Oh dear. There's no toothpaste. Not really. You might be offered a powder, crushed charcoal, chalk, or powdered salt. It stings. It scrapes. It does not foam. If you're lucky, there's a tooth powder mixed with baking soda and peppermint oil, but mostly it just tastes like dry pain. Your toothbrush is made of boar bristles. It smells like old wood in someone else's mouth. You scrub quickly, not thoroughly. Dentists are expensive. Tooth decay is common. Mouthwash is either vinegar or pure alcohol. You rinse with a cup of water and pretend you feel fresh. Now, hair. Men have it easy. A brush, some pomade, a tragic parting down the middle, and off they go. For women, it's a nightmare ballet. Hair must be brushed, 100 strokes a day at least. It must be pinned, braided, curled, and tamed. No loose hair, no bangs, no modern softness. Victorian hair is an architecture. It must be arranged, often with the help of a maid, a rat. That's a hair rat, not a rodent, don't ask. And an iron heated over a flame that has singed generations of ears. Deodorant? Don't be ridiculous. Perfume is your only ally. Lavender water, rose oil, a dab of something expensive behind the ears. You don't mask odor, you perfume around it. Underwear consists of layers, chemises, drawers, petticoats. All of it is washed rarely, aired frequently, and maintained with a kind of grim determination. Your boots are polished. Your gloves are laid out. Your hat is waiting. Because even though you are now technically clean by Victorian standards, you are not yet fit for public display. That requires the entire ensemble, the full presentation. Because in this world, it's not enough to be clean. You must appear correct, so you step back into your corset, your high collar, your veil, your bonnet, your tiny boots, every piece in place, every button secure. You glance in the mirror, hair tight, face pale, lips pressed just enough to seem calm but not flirtatious, and you nod. You are now suitable for suitors. Not comfortable, but suitable. And with that, you descend again. Into the parlors, into the social rituals, into the maddeningly restrained theater of Victorian courtship. And all this, just to be permitted to stand near someone and ask if they like the weather. Love in the 19th century is not born from chemistry. It's born from surviving the morning routine. Let's talk about your outfit. You didn't choose it. Not really. It chose you. Or more precisely, society chose it for you. You merely had the privilege of wrestling yourself into it, piece by inflexible piece, until your reflection whispered, "You are now socially acceptable, barely." You're dressed not for comfort, not even for beauty, but for decorum. That most sacred Victorian virtue, the belief that if one simply suffers enough under linen, whalebone, and wool, then surely God and the neighbors will approve. Let's begin with the female ensemble, because it is a masterpiece of impractical oppression. You start with a chemise, loose and soft. This is the last comfort you'll know for several hours. Next come the drawers, long split-crotch underpants that offer airflow but little dignity. Then, of course, the corset, that charming torture device that squeezes the lungs, lifts the bust, and whittles the waist down to something that barely supports a spleen. And yes, your ribs might creak when you bend. That's normal. Healthy even, according to the fashion columns of the time. If you faint, it simply means you're fashionable. Over this come layers, petticoats, sometimes 3, sometimes 5. Stiffened with horsehair or crinoline to create the correct bell shape. And if the current fashion leans toward the bustle, oh joy! Now you must strap on a padded cage to give the illusion that you have an entire armchair affixed to your backside. The dress itself is high-necked, long-sleeved, and heavy. Wool in winter, cotton or silk in summer, though don't expect relief. Victorian summer dresses are not lightweight. They are just slightly less suffocating. Every inch of your skin, save for your face and hands, is covered. Modesty demands it. Modesty also demands gloves, even indoors, even when pouring tea, even when your hands are sweating like they're auditioning for a boil. Accessories include a brooch, in case you forget who died recently. A watch chain, you're not allowed to manage your own time, but you may wear it. And possibly a chatelaine, a jangling, decorative keyring that lets everyone know you're in charge of something, though no one is quite sure what. Now your hair, twisted, pinned, rolled, and occasionally oiled until it resembles a pastry that's both architectural and slightly flammable. A hat is mandatory. Indoors, you may remove it. Outdoors, never. Bonnet strings must be tied just so. Not too loose, flirtatious. Not too tight, desperate. And shoes? Well, you don't walk in Victorian boots. You endure them. They are narrow, buttoned with a tiny hook, and they will betray you on a gravel path. Arch support? That's a sin. Let's shift to the male experience, which, while simpler, still manages to be wildly inconvenient. A gentleman begins with underdrawers and a shirt, white, crisp, and stiff enough to qualify as light armor. Over that, a waistcoat, snug and buttoned high. Then trousers, pressed and slightly too short, so that your boots may shine properly. A cravat or necktie is wrapped and knotted with the precision of a minor surgical procedure. Then the coat, tailored, formal, and heavier than necessary. In winter, it's wool. In summer, it's still wool, because linen is for colonials and the lower classes. Gloves are standard. A pocket watch is ideal. A top hat is essential. If you remove your hat indoors, hold it with dignity, no spinning, no fidgeting, and absolutely no placing it on a sofa. You may think yourself well-dressed, but unless you're suffering at least a little, you're probably doing it wrong. And all of this, every thread, every buckle, every sneeze-inducing plume of starch, is worn not for self-expression, but for survival in a society that values appearance above almost all else. Now, let's go home. Because while you may be suffocating in wool and worried your corset might puncture a lung, at least you'll have the comfort of a cozy, warm house. Right? Wrong. Victorian housing is a magnificent illusion. Grand from the outside, dreadful from within. It's all facades, brick, stone, pride, and very little plumbing. If you're upper class, you live in a townhome. If you're middle class, a terrace or semi-detached. If you're lower middle class, a cottage or mews. But in all cases, comfort is not the goal. Respectability is. Let's enter the parlor, the formal room, the performance room. It's where you receive visitors, entertain callers, or sit motionless for hours, pretending to enjoy embroidery. The furniture is stiff. The wallpaper is floral and slightly threatening. There are too many doilies and absolutely no place to relax. The drawing room is marginally softer, but still largely ornamental. You may rest here if you're recovering from the shock of seeing someone's ankles. The fireplace is the only source of heat. It's also the source of most indoor air pollution, soot stains, and the endless chore of ash removal. There is no central heating. There are no vents. Just a fire that smokes, a window that freezes, and a draft so persistent it should pay rent. The hallways are dark. The stairs creak. Gas lamps flicker with a soft hiss. They offer just enough light to bump into furniture, but not enough to prevent a lawsuit. Your bedroom is chilly. Always. Even in July. Even with the windows closed and the drapes drawn. The mattress is lumpy. The sheets are clean but stiff. The chamber pot waits silently in the corner like a judgmental toad. There is no bathroom. Let me repeat that. There is no bathroom. If you're lucky, there is an outdoor privy. If you're very lucky, there is a small water closet on the landing, shared by the household and usually located far enough from your bedroom to require a coat and boots. Bathing happens in a portable tin tub, filled by servants one bucket at a time and drained with similar effort. Full-body baths are rare. Soap is made from animal fat. Shampoo does not exist. Hair is washed in basins and dried by prayer. The kitchen is far from the dining room, often in the basement. This is not for practicality. It is to hide the cooking process, lest your guests remember that food does not emerge fully formed from silver trays. The walls sweat, the ceilings stain. Mold is a frequent visitor, and wallpaper peels like a shy snake. Candles are expensive, gas lamps dangerous. And the smell, a heady mix of coal smoke, boiled cabbage, chamber pot, and wet wool, is impossible to escape. And yet, this is your castle, your sanctuary, your stage. Every day you rise in this chill. You dress in these layers. You eat these cold, dry meals in a house that doesn't love you. And then, you go out into the world to find love. Because in Victorian society, romance is not a flame. It's a slow burn, carefully tended behind layers of social armor, flickering faintly in parlors and at dances, always just out of reach. You suffer the boots, the corsets, the starch, the mildew, because to court someone, to love someone, is not about pleasure. It's about perseverance. You've eaten your toasts. You've sponge-washed your face. You've been properly trussed up in 6 layers of wool and self-denial. And now, whether you are wealthy, poor, romantic, or simply unlucky, it's time to work. Because in Victorian England, love might be the end goal, but labor is the permanent reality. Let's start with the middle and working classes, where most people live. Because not everyone is swooning in parlors or exchanging glances over teacups. Some are cleaning chimneys. Some are dying in factories. And some are 12 years old, covered in coal dust, climbing into a pipe no grown adult would dare enter. Your job is not a passion. It's not your identity. It's a contract with survival, written in blisters and soot. If you're a working-class man, your options are brutal and few. You might be a coal miner, descending into blackness before dawn. Your only light a flickering flame on your helmet, and the soft, ever-present threat of cave-ins, explosions, and poisonous gas. You crawl through tunnels barely tall enough for a crouch, pickaxe in hand, lungs filling with dust that will one day choke the life from you. And long before that, make every breath a gravelly struggle. You might be a factory worker, hunched over a machine in a textile mill or ironworks, operating whirring, spitting, screaming equipment built not for safety, but for speed. If your sleeve gets caught, you may lose an arm. If you sneeze too loud, you may lose your job. The hours are long. 14, sometimes more. Breaks are brief. Injuries are common. Compensation is laughable. And at the end of the day, you return home, exhausted, to a cramped flat with no ventilation and a mattress you share with 3 siblings and a suspicious number of bedbugs. Romance. Try keeping a flower alive in that kind of air. If you're a working-class woman, congratulations. You work just as hard and get half the pay. You might be a domestic servant, rising before the sun to scrub floors, polish boots, stoke fires, and prepare tea you're not allowed to drink. You clean rooms you don't sleep in, fold clothes you'll never wear, and speak only when spoken to. And even then, with deference. The lady of the house might spend an hour choosing a ribbon for her bonnet. You spend an hour scraping soot off a hearthstone with your fingernails. If you're in a factory, you may be spinning thread, dipping matches in phosphorus, or rolling cigars. If the materials are toxic, and they often are, your skin burns, your teeth fall out, and your hair thins. The work is women's work, so it's paid in pence. And then, of course, there are the children. Victorian childhood is less about play and more about how many hours you can work before your hands go numb. A boy of 6 might work as a chimney sweep, crawling up flues barely wider than his shoulders, scraping soot with a brush in one hand and a prayer in the other. He comes down coughing, bleeding, and praised for being nimble. A girl of 8 might be a scullery maid, washing dishes in cold water until her fingers split, running errands through rain-soaked streets, scrubbing the boots of men who don't bother to look down. Education? If you're lucky. But more often, the only lesson you learn is keep moving, keep quiet, and keep your head down. But let's not forget the middle class. Those bastions of respectability and corseted ambition. Their work isn't any easier, just different. If you're a clerk, your day is spent hunched over ledgers, your handwriting judged more harshly than your moral character. Ink stains your cuffs, boredom stains your soul. You file, record, tabulate, and repeat, all under the baleful gaze of a manager who once got promoted for spelling guano correctly in an inventory sheet. If you're a teacher, you instruct children who do not want to be instructed, in classrooms that smell of chalk and damp wool. Your salary is pitiful, your status barely above the tradesman, and your workload enough to make even your pupils weep in sympathy. And if you're a shop girl, working the counter in a dress shop or haberdashery, your smile is your armor. You are polite, quick, knowledgeable, and utterly replaceable. If a man flirts with you, danger. If a woman complains, termination. And all the while you're standing for 10 hours, corset tight, in shoes that were designed by a sadist. Now what of the gentry? The idle rich? Surely they don't work. But they do, just differently. If you're a wealthy man, your labor is social. Your office is the gentleman's club, the dinner party, the board meeting where investments are discussed over brandy and quiet nepotism. You manage your estate, usually by making other people do it, and you study the papers, all while complaining about the laziness of the lower classes. If you're a wealthy woman, your work is performance, a carefully rehearsed ballet of decorum, conversation, and endless vigilance. You must be graceful. You must be poised. You must never say too much or too little. You must know when to faint. You must never perspire. You write letters. You visit friends. You plan dinner parties for people you despise. You ensure your gloves are always white, your posture upright, your speech refined. You oversee the staff, 12 of them at least, and pretend your husband isn't halfway drunk by noon. You are the embodiment of elegance. You are also deeply, terribly bored. And through it all, regardless of class or calling, one truth persists. You must look good while suffering. Love is not forbidden, but it is secondary. You court not with your heart, but with your income, your references, your posture. You don't win affection by being kind. You win it by being employable. Even romance itself is a kind of job. You must know the social script, how to walk, how to curtsy, how to converse without suggesting anything so vulgar as interest. Every smile is strategic. Every glance is choreographed. One wrong word, and the whole arrangement collapses into scandal. So yes, there is work in the fields, work in the factories, work in the drawing rooms and back alleys, work that breaks the back, work that breaks the mind, work that leaves your hands raw and your dreams shriveled. And somehow, amid all that sweat and coal and corset steel, you're expected to fall in love. Softly, quietly, in perfect posture, with polished boots. Because even when your lungs are black with soot and your waist is bound in whalebone, you must still be courtship material. Because in Victorian England, appearance is everything, and hard labor? That's just part of the costume. You've made it through the morning. You're dressed, fed, marginally clean, and have survived several hours of toil, social restraint, and possibly scalding your hand on a teapot. But before you can even begin to consider matters of the heart, there's someone else you must consult. Not your suitor, not your parents. God. And also everyone else pretending to speak for him. Because in Victorian England, religion isn't just a Sunday obligation, it's a moral surveillance system wrapped in lace and Latin, humming beneath every moment of your life. Whether you live in a sprawling London townhouse or a two-room Yorkshire cottage, the church is everywhere. Its spires rise above the soot. Its bells mark your days. Its teachings shape your behavior, your identity, your shame, and most importantly, your dating life. Let's begin with the basics. The dominant force is Christianity, specifically Anglicanism, if you're respectable. If you're Irish or poor or both, you might be Catholic. If you're devoutly serious and possibly quite stern, you're a nonconformist, Methodist, Baptist, or any flavor of Protestant dissenting from the main dish of the Church of England. Church attendance is not optional. It's expected. Mandatory. Twice on Sundays if you're aiming to appear pious or attractive. Because yes, your presence in the pews is a form of courtship in itself. You sit upright. You dress with extra care. You do not fidget. You do not yawn. And you certainly do not look at someone else during the sermon, unless it's with an expression of holy concern for their soul. Now, religion doesn't just tell you what to believe. It tells you who you're allowed to love. Marrying outside your denomination. Scandalous. Catholic marrying Anglican. Prepare for whispered gossip and possibly a furious grandmother. Jewish marrying Christian. Legally difficult and socially disastrous. Interracial marriage. Practically unthinkable unless you're in a novel written by someone trying to cause a scene. Sex before marriage? don't even think about it. Thinking about it? Still a sin. In Victorian England, purity isn't just encouraged, it's enforced. For women especially, your virtue is your value. You are judged not just on behavior, but thoughts. And if those thoughts even tiptoe near desire, shame is already pounding at the door with a lace handkerchief and a loaded Bible. There are no dating apps. There are no flings. There are only chaperoned visits, letters passed through a maid, and the constant crushing awareness that everything might be morally incorrect. So you don't flirt. You indicate. You don't kiss. You exchange glances. You don't date. You pray you're noticed and hope it's not sinful. But religion isn't the only thing policing your courtship. Oh no. That would be too easy. Enter Victorian superstition. Because while people go to church on Sunday, they also toss salt over their shoulders, avoid certain numbers, and believe that seeing a magpie before breakfast might doom their marriage to early widowhood. Here are just a few dating-adjacent superstitions you might encounter. If a girl drops her glove at a party and a gentleman picks it up, it's not just a kind gesture. It might be seen as a romantic overture. If you dream of a man 3 nights in a row, he's your future husband, unless he's French. Then it's just indigestion. Meeting your future spouse in the rain is considered lucky, unless it's a funeral procession, in which case you'll probably marry twice and regret both. If you kiss under mistletoe, you are essentially engaged, spiritually, if not legally. If you sweep under a woman's feet, she'll never marry. Maids take this one extremely seriously. Even flowers have meaning. Red roses, love, white lilies, purity. Yellow roses, jealousy. A sprig of lavender, I distrust you. You can ruin a proposal with the wrong bouquet. But don't worry. If your romance hits trouble, you can always try a folk remedy. Want someone to fall for you? Put a strand of your hair in their tea. Want to make a rival unattractive? Sprinkle salt across their threshold and pray they trip. Want to know who you'll marry? Sleep with a slice of wedding cake under your pillow and wait for the dream. And yes, all of this was totally normal. And if you're truly desperate, you might consult a cunning woman, a local healer or village wise woman who offers herbal cures, romantic charms, and advice delivered in whispers over steaming mugs of things that smell like boiled moss and minor hexes. Of course, don't get caught, because while some believe in these things, the church certainly doesn't. The divide between faith and folklore is wide, but everyone walks it. Even the most pious families keep a horseshoe nailed above the door, just in case. Now let's say you're in love, truly, deeply, hopelessly. There's still one last spiritual hurdle: death. Victorian England is obsessed with it. Mortality isn't a fear, it's a hobby. Romantic poetry mourns lost lovers. Paintings linger over pale cheeks and wilting violets. Mourning clothes are a wardrobe category unto themselves. And people believe, genuinely, that love can follow you into the grave, which means your sweetheart might give you a mourning brooch, a small piece of jewelry made from their hair, twisted into a delicate knot, and worn close to the heart. Sweet? Yes. Slightly terrifying? Also yes. And if your beloved dies, your grief is codified. You wear black for a year, then mauve. then gray. You do not remarry too quickly unless you wish to be socially exiled. You may write poetry, publish memorials, and sigh dramatically on balconies. This too is part of the performance. Romance and religion are inseparable. To court someone is to make a moral declaration. To fall in love is to risk spiritual peril. To marry is to enter a holy contract, one you cannot break without invoking the full wrath of God, your family, and the ladies of the Wednesday sewing circle. And still, people do it. Over and over. Quietly, carefully, lovingly. They navigate the prayers, the gossip, the fear of eternal damnation, all for the chance to hold someone's hand for an extra second, to read a letter twice, to tuck a dried flower inside a book and keep it for years. Because even when love is surrounded by rules and watched by saints, it still finds a way to whisper, even in a world where everything is a sin. So, you've survived your morning labor, avoided eternal damnation with proper posture, and maybe, shared a mutual glance with someone who also happens to be Anglican, appropriately aged, modestly connected, and has not yet sneezed in public. Now it's time to enjoy the finer things. Victorian meals and entertainment, however, are not about indulgence. They are not about comfort. They are, once again, about display. Let's begin with the main meal of the day, misleadingly called dinner, which is eaten not at noon, but often at 5, 6, or even 8 o'clock if you're particularly refined or cosmopolitan. What we might now call lunch was then luncheon, a lighter meal served around midday, and breakfast, as you've already learned, was mostly toast and character building. Dinner, however, is the stage. If you're in the middle or upper classes, you're attending or hosting a formal dinner party, and that means changing clothes again. You must now become your most elegant, least sincere self. Men put on black tailcoats, white bow ties, and waistcoats so stiff they could stand up without assistance. Women don low-cut evening gowns, opera gloves, and jewelry that is meant to sparkle just enough to be noticed, but not so much as to signal desperation. You arrive at the host's home by carriage. You're greeted by a butler who takes your coat and your will to live. You make polite small talk in the drawing room with people you already saw twice this week and who you absolutely cannot stand. The room smells of perfume, coal, and mild resentment. Eventually, dinner is announced. A gong is sometimes used, a literal gong, because subtlety is for the poor. You proceed into the dining room. Seating is a delicate operation orchestrated by the hostess to prevent scandal, promote alliances, and occasionally punish guests with proximity to a known bore. You do not choose where you sit. You earn your placement through social standing and invisible feuds. The table is a battlefield of etiquette. There are more forks than you have fingers. Bread plates to the left, glasses to the right, and under no circumstances should you ever attempt to butter a whole slice of bread at once. You tear off a piece, butter it, eat it, repeat. For the rest of your natural life. Now, the food. Victorian cuisine is not about flavor, it's about effort. The number of courses, the complexity of the sauces, the origin of the wine, all of it serves to signal that the host has taste, money, and at least one French cookbook. You may be served. Clear consommé that tastes like guilt. Fish poached in aspic, which is exactly as wobbly and upsetting as it sounds. Roast beef so dry you could insulate walls with it. Boiled fowl under a white sauce, which is just Victorian for "we gave up." And finally, dessert, a trifle that's been sitting out for 2 hours, topped with whipped cream and existential dread. If you are lucky, there will be wine. If you are unlucky, it will be claret, which Victorians loved and modern palates describe as vinegar with ideas. Conversation during dinner is carefully monitored. Gentlemen speak to the ladies on their right during the first course, then switch to the left after the second. If you forget, you are not only impolite, you may be remembered for years as the one who failed to observe conversational symmetry. Politics? Dangerous. Religion? Off limits unless you're quoting Psalms. Romance? Only in the form of poetry references and veiled glances. And yet, beneath all this protocol, courtship simmers. A passing of the salt can carry 1,000 implications. A compliment on a young lady's sleeve might make her weak. A dropped napkin could launch a marriage if retrieved with the right flourish. After dinner, the women withdraw to the drawing room for tea. The men remain to discuss serious topics like business, hunting, and whose son is secretly terrible at Latin. Eventually, the sexes rejoin. Now, the entertainment begins. You might be asked to sing, or recite a poem, or perform a dramatic reading from The Lady of Shalott, while others pretend not to notice their feet falling asleep. If someone plays piano, everyone must suffer through at least 2 songs before it's socially acceptable to yawn behind a gloved hand. And if the household is daring, there might be parlor games. Ah, the Victorian parlor game, a fascinating combination of suppressed desire and absolute social terror. Games include charades, the only time you're allowed to be dramatic without consequences. The Minister's Cat, an alphabetical personality contest for people too repressed to say bored. Blind Man's Bluff, which is almost flirtatious if you ignore the blindfold and the judgment. And of course, the ever-popular Consequences, where you write anonymous sentences on folded paper, resulting in stories that sound like romantic gossip invented by a drunk telegram operator. But the crown jewel of entertainment is, of course, the ball. If you're attending one, expect pain. Expect beauty. Expect a whirlwind of starched collars, spinning skirts, and calculated ankle exposure. Dancing is not casual, it is regulated romance. Each dance is pre-assigned. You must fill out a dance card in advance, often hours or days before the event. If someone forgets to ask you in time, you sit silently, watching others waltz while pretending not to cry into your lemonade. The dances themselves are coded languages of touch, proximity, and timing. A misstep is not just clumsy, it's socially revealing. If you stumble, if you turn too soon, if you step on her hem, people will talk. The most intimate moment you can hope for might be the light press of a gloved hand at the end of a quadrille. And yet, hearts race, breaths catch. Because this is the closest anyone gets to physical affection in public. After the final waltz, carriages arrive. Guests depart. Hands are shaken, nods exchanged, and subtle cues of interest are noted, remembered, and recorded in diaries that begin with "Dearest Journal" and often end with "He did not look at me again." As you collapse into bed, corset loosened, collar removed, you wonder, did they notice me? Was that glance real? Did they mean it when they said my voice was pleasantly clear? This is the courtship dance of the Victorian world. Not passion, but patience. Not fireworks, but flickers. Not declarations, but delicately served puddings and practiced glances. Here, love is not shouted. It is whispered over soup. It starts with a tickle, a dry cough, a slight chill you can't shake, even under 3 petticoats and a blanket stitched by nuns. In today's world, you'd take a paracetamol and get on with your day. In Victorian England, that cough might be the beginning of the end. Because in this world, medicine isn't comforting. It's experimental, it's painful, it's often worse than the disease. And death? Death is everywhere. Not just feared, but expected. Let's start with the basics. You're sick. What now? First, pretend you're not. Illness carries social stigma. A lady doesn't admit to digestive issues. A gentleman doesn't mention headaches. And under no circumstances does anyone speak openly about the lungs. Because if someone suspects your cough is deep, the whispers begin. Consumption, they'll say, the galloping kind. Tuberculosis is the era's slow-motion executioner. It's everywhere, especially in the city, especially among the young, especially among those who dare to be romantic. It wastes you. Pale cheeks, bright eyes, poetic suffering. In novels, it makes you more beautiful. In reality, it drowns your lungs slowly until you bleed into a handkerchief and die on a fainting couch. If that's not your fate, perhaps it's typhus, carried by lice and filth, or cholera from the water, because yes, the same pump that fills your bath may also be filling your grave. Maybe it's scarlet fever, or measles, or diphtheria, or influenza, which sounds quaint until it rips through a neighborhood and leaves only silence. But wait, it gets worse. Because even if your disease is survivable, the treatment might not be. Let's visit the doctor. He arrives at your home in a top hat and a coat filled with malpractice waiting to happen. There's no license required, no antibiotics, no understanding of germ theory until the late century. And even then, many doctors believe illness is caused by imbalanced humors, bad air, or moral weakness. What do they offer you? Bleeding. Yes, still, with leeches or with a blade. Let the sickness drain out of you with your life force. Blistering. Hot irons or mustard plasters to draw out impurities. It's like being burned alive politely. Calomel, a mercury-based purgative. That's right, mercury, the shiny, toxic metal. You'll sweat, vomit, shake, and possibly go blind. But hey, you might also feel slightly better before you die. Laudanum, the Victorian cure-all, a mixture of alcohol and opium, prescribed for everything from coughs to menstrual cramps to heartache. It numbs the pain and slowly builds an addiction strong enough to erase your personality. And yet, it works. Feeling anxious? Have a spoonful. Can't sleep? 2 spoonfuls. Just lost a child? take the whole bottle. Everyone, from infants to grieving widows, is given opiates, and no one calls it a crisis. It's just Tuesday. There are also herbal remedies, sold by traveling quacks and well-meaning grandmothers. Tinctures of valerian, wormwood, foxglove. Some help, some hurt, some do both. And if nothing else works, it's time for the clergyman. Because when the doctor sighs and the mother weeps and the laudanum runs out, there's only one figure left to call. The man with the collar and the final rites. You lie in bed, dressed in your best linen, because you must die respectably, and hope your passing will be swift, painless, and maybe poetic. You whisper your regrets. You name your heirs. You pray. And then you're gone. If you're lucky, you get a proper mourning. A black-edged death notice in the paper. A closed casket in the parlor. Mourners in crepe and gloves. A meal afterward with dry sandwiches and slightly too sweet sherry. For women, mourning is work. You wear black for 2 years, then gray, then lilac. You do not laugh in public. You do not attend parties. You do not even consider remarrying until society gives its subtle nod, usually by ignoring you just long enough to make it painful. Death is not hidden in the Victorian world. It is embraced. Children are photographed post-mortem. Hair is braided into jewelry. Memorial brooches, lockets, and poems are all the rage. You are remembered, visibly, tangibly, publicly. Because in a world where illness is constant, grief is fashion. And now let's turn back to romance. Because, surprisingly, sickness is sometimes romanticized. A fainting lady, mysterious. A gentleman with a cane and tragic cough, irresistible. In literature, illness adds depth to love. In real life, it adds a tombstone. But the fantasy persists. The idea that love can conquer consumption, that 2 pale hands, trembling on a handkerchief, are more intimate than 1,000 words. In reality, the illnesses are quick or slow, but never kind. Hospitals exist, but they are terrifying. Overcrowded, unsanitary, and bleak. If you're sent to one, it's because there are no other options. People go in with colds and come out as corpses. Mental illness? Barely acknowledged. If you are melancholic, you are sent to a sanatorium. If you are hysterical, you are prescribed rest and electroshock. If you are inconvenient, you are locked away and forgotten. And still, somehow, people survive. They suffer through winter coughs and summer fevers. They pray over boiling water and scalding compresses. They nurse their families through plagues and come out with hands blistered and eyes hollow. And through it all, they still fall in love. Because love, like sickness, spreads quietly. It moves through rooms, across glances, between coughs and letters and fainting spells. It writes poems beside deathbeds. It carves names into headstones. It lives in a lock of hair, a faded letter, a single glove left behind. And in the Victorian world, love and death are not opposites. They are companions. Each reminding you how fragile the other is. Each making the other feel just a little more urgent. Laced, labeled, and locked into a role you didn't choose. There are many kinds of prisons in Victorian England. Some have iron bars. Others have lace curtains, bone stays, and wedding rings. Because in this world, to be a woman, a child, or a member of a family is not simply a matter of identity. It's a full-time position, assigned, accepted, and rarely escaped. Let's begin where most Victorian life begins, with women. You are born, hopefully healthy, hopefully plain. Too much beauty invites danger. Too little, and marriage prospects vanish like mist. From the moment you're able to walk, you're trained. Not educated, not empowered, trained. To sit still, to speak softly, to smile politely, to embroider birds onto pillows no one wants, to know which fork is for fish, how to curtsy without falling over, and exactly how long you may speak before it becomes unladylike. If you're wealthy, you're not working, but you're working constantly. Your day is a loop of passive labor, writing letters, hosting visitors, managing servants, and pretending that none of it drains you. You may attend a musical recital or oversee your children's education from a distance. You read moral literature. You sip tea like it's a weapon. You exist in full view, always performing, never relaxing. If you're middle class, you're expected to do everything. You may have one servant, maybe, but most likely, you are the servant. You cook, you sew, you raise the children, you maintain appearances. You are exhausted before breakfast and apologizing for it by supper. And if you're working class, you have no time for appearances. You labor as a laundress, seamstress, domestic, or factory worker. Your hands are cracked. Your body is tired. And your freedom? Sold long ago for the price of bread and boots. You are also expected, of course, to be pure, virginal, quiet, a paragon of self-restraint, but not too quiet. You must also be cheerful. Not too cheerful. That's flirtatious. Not too aloof, that's prideful. You must smile but never seduce. Serve but never seem eager. Be intelligent, but only in ways that do not threaten anyone in trousers. Your body is not yours. It belongs to society, to your husband, to your future children. Because womanhood in Victorian England is defined by motherhood, which brings us to the subject of childbirth. It is private, painful, and dangerous. There are no epidurals, no antiseptics, no clean hospital gowns. You deliver in your home, often in your bed, often with only a midwife or untrained doctor, and a prayer. You may survive, or not. 1 in 200 mothers don't. If you do, your recovery is not guaranteed. Infections are common. Postpartum depression is not understood. Grief, if your baby dies, is acknowledged, briefly. And then life moves on. Because babies die constantly, infant mortality is not a tragedy. It is a statistical certainty. Children die from fever, from infections, from malnutrition, from falling down the stairs, from breathing the London air. Most mothers have many children not because they want to, but because they must. To replace the ones who will not live, to provide heirs, to fulfill their duty. And if you think women had no control over their bodies, you're right. Birth control is rare, unreliable, and often illegal. Condoms exist, made from animal intestines and sold under euphemisms, but are expensive and frowned upon. A woman who speaks openly about preventing pregnancy is considered immoral. A woman who gets pregnant out of wedlock? Ruined, shamed, rejected, possibly institutionalized. The child is labeled a bastard, and both mother and baby carry that stigma like a scarlet letter written in lace. Now let's talk about the children who do survive. They are not cuddled and cooed over. Not for long. A child is either a tiny adult or a burden. If you are upper class, you are raised by nannies, governesses, and tutors. You see your parents briefly, like royalty waving from a balcony. You are dressed in impractical velvet, photographed beside taxidermy, and punished for speaking out of turn. If you are a girl, your path is clear. Piano lessons, French, deportment, then marriage. If you are a boy, it's Latin, Greek, and off to boarding school, where your personality is reshaped into cold ambition and an aggressive affection for cricket. Middle-class children are expected to help. Fetch things, run errands, practice respectability like it's a sacred script. And if you are poor, your childhood ends at age 5. You work in factories, in fields, as chimney sweeps, crossing sweepers, match sellers. Your fingers bleed, your back aches, and you are told this is normal. Discipline is harsh. Corporal punishment is not just allowed, it's encouraged. Spare the rod, spoil the child, is quoted with terrifying cheerfulness. You are hit with rulers, belts, canes, at school, at home, even in public. Tears are weakness. Talking back is rebellion. Your job is to obey, grow up, and carry your parents' hopes like an anvil on your shoulders. Now, the family structure. It is rigid, paternal, hierarchical. The father is the head. His word is law. He may be distant, gruff, or entirely absent, but he is always obeyed. The mother runs the home, but always in deference to her husband. She must be calm, competent, and ready to die quietly without disrupting the roast. Children are expected to honor both. There is little affection shown publicly. Hugs are rare. Kisses, scandalous. Emotions are folded into letters and sewn into pillowcases. But inside that rigid form, there is still love. It is not always spoken. It is not always kind. But it is real. A mother may sit by a feverish child's bed all night, praying softly. A father may save pennies for years to buy his daughter a new pair of boots. A child may press a pressed flower into their mother's Bible before leaving for school. These are small, quiet gestures, hidden in the corners of duty. Romance and affection in the Victorian family are not loud. They are dutiful. They are shown in sacrifices, in silence, in staying. Because in this world, family is not about joy. It's about responsibility. It's not about freedom. It's about fitting in. You do not choose your path. You walk it. And if you're lucky, there is someone beside you, equally tired, equally bound, equally hopeful, and together you carry on. Even the polite ones have knives. They just use them with grammar. It's mid-afternoon in Victorian England. The sun, such as it is, filters through a veil of smoke and smog. The sky is the color of pewter. The air is heavy with the scent of coal and cabbage. The workday may be winding down for some, but for most, The real struggle is just hitting its stride. Because behind the polished boots and quiet nods, tension rules everything. This is a society built like a corset, tightly structured, rigidly layered, and always one pulled string away from disaster. Let's begin with the servant class. You're in the kitchen, elbow deep in soap suds, when you hear the bell. The fourth time today. You dry your hands on a rag, run up 2 flights of stairs, and enter the drawing room to find that Lady Margaret would like her shawl moved 6 inches to the left. Not removed, not replaced, just shifted. You smile, you nod, and in your head, you imagine setting the shawl on fire. Servants are expected to be invisible, tireless, obedient, and grateful. A good servant doesn't speak unless spoken to. A great servant doesn't speak at all. Your hours? From dawn until everyone else is asleep. Your wage? Pitiful. Your prospects? None. And yet, you know everything. You hear the arguments behind closed doors. You notice who sneaks home late. You read the faces of the rich like a second language. Because proximity does not mean equality. It means witness. Now let's talk about social class. The real battlefield of Victorian life. This isn't just rich and poor. It's layers. Dozens of them. A complex, coded hierarchy so detailed it makes a beehive look anarchic. You have the aristocracy, who inherit land and titles and money and make sure you never forget it. The gentry, who own property and maybe a crumbling estate and definitely a dwindling sense of superiority. The middle class, climbing upward with relentless respectability. The lower middle class, barely holding the line between decency and despair. The working class, who labor to keep everyone else upright. The destitute, who are blamed for their own misfortune and punished accordingly. And no one wants to slide downward. You attend church not just for God, but for status. You marry not just for love, but for survival. You send your children to school not to learn, but to be seen learning. Even among friends, there are rankings. Your father was a barrister? That's nice, but Lady Evelyn's uncle was once invited to tea with someone whose cousin nearly met Prince Albert. So she wins. Class doesn't whisper. It hums through every interaction. You may borrow someone's sugar, but not their spoon. You may visit a friend's home, but not their bedroom. You may speak your mind, but only if it agrees with the person wealthier than you. And this isn't just inconvenient, it's dangerous. Because if you offend someone higher up, they can ruin you, disinvite you, gossip about you, discredit your family, ensure that no one ever dances with your daughter again. Now let's visit the streets, where the conflicts are more direct. In the East End of London, where the air is thick with poverty, you pass children playing in gutters, their laughter edged with hunger. You see men drunk at noon because gin is cheaper than bread. You see women with bruises covered by scarves and silence. There is no romance here. There is survival. And yet, even in the alleys, rules exist. You don't cross someone else's corner. You don't ask questions in the workhouse line. You don't look at a copper the wrong way. If you're caught stealing, expect punishment. Justice is swift, brutal, and deeply uneven. Theft might get you a month in prison. Poaching? Transportation to Australia. Murder? Possibly hanging. Being poor? Constant suspicion. If you're rich, a scandal is a headline. If you're poor, a scandal is a sentence. Now back to the polite world, where conflict is subtler, but no less vicious. Social battles are fought through manners. A slight delay in returning a visit? That's a message. A lukewarm compliment about your hat? That's war. A dance card not fully filled? Social death. Women wield power here, not through politics, but through influence. They control who is invited, who is snubbed, who is whispered about behind a fan over weak tea. And if a woman truly wants to ruin you, she doesn't shout. She doesn't cry. She simply withdraws her approval, and the world follows. But there are real battles, too. Ones that don't make it into the novels. There are strikes. Coal miners who walk out. Match girls who burn their fingers in factories and decide they've had enough. Men demanding shorter hours, better pay. Women demanding the right to not die from exhaustion. And the system responds with violence. Police with batons. Employers with blacklists. Landlords with eviction notices. Every step forward is met with 3 steps of resistance. And yet, people keep stepping. Even within households, conflict simmers. A husband may beat his wife and face no charges. A child may be sent away for correction and return with scars. A daughter may fall in love with the wrong man and find herself locked in a room until she agrees to marry someone with better breeding and worse breath. The Victorian home is not always a sanctuary. Sometimes it is the quietest battleground of all. But let's return for a moment to romance, to the idea that in all this chaos, someone might still see you, even if they're across a crowded room, even if they never speak it aloud, even if all they do is offer their arm and walk with you slowly around the edge of a room buzzing with gossip and powdered resentment. Conflict may surround you, but love, in this world, still happens. It blooms in stolen letters, in brief touches, in silence so loud it drowns out every bell. The fire dies, the lights dim, and every sound could be your last. Night falls slowly in Victorian England, but never gently. The sun sinks beneath the horizon with a rusted groan, casting long gray shadows across cobbled streets. The gas lamps sputter to life with a soft hiss, one by one, a flickering procession that tries, but never quite manages, to chase the dark away. Inside the home, the fire is allowed to burn low. Candles are lit. Curtains are drawn. Boots are taken off with a sigh. And with each soft clink of china being cleared, each scrape of a chair leg against the floorboards, the unspoken truth begins to settle into every corner. Night is not for rest. It's for fear. You might imagine the world slows down after dusk, but in Victorian England, the night is alive. And it is not kind. Let's start outside. The streets are quiet, but not still. The city breathes differently after dark, heavier, closer. You hear footsteps echoing far off, or far too close. A sudden cough from an alley, the jingle of a constable's watch chain, the snap of a carriage whip. There are no electric lights to keep the shadows at bay. Gaslight gives off a warm, weak glow. Everything else is blackness, the kind that swallows detail, the kind that makes you question every shape, every noise, every flicker of motion in your periphery. If you're poor, you avoid the night altogether. If you're wealthy, you pretend it doesn't exist. But if you must walk in it, carry a lantern, walk quickly, and never meet anyone's eyes. Because at night, danger comes out to breathe. Crime thrives in darkness. Pickpockets, footpads, drunks, and desperate men patrol the narrow alleys and unlit corners. If you live in London, you know to avoid certain streets. And if you're a woman, you do not walk alone, ever. One wrong turn and you could find yourself in the arms of a stranger, or in the gutter, clutching at your torn skirts, praying that someone hears you. They usually don't. Even the law is unreliable at night. The constables, often older or underpaid, walk their routes with truncheons and lanterns, but little real authority. If something happens to you, chances are you will not be believed, not unless you're rich. And even then, barely. Outside the cities, in the countryside, the night brings different fears. Wolves no longer roam England, but superstition still does. The trees rustle with imagined spirits. Barn owls are seen as omens. A knock at the door after midnight means death is nearby, or at the very least, gossip. You keep the fire warm. You keep the windows bolted. You leave the Bible open on the nightstand, just in case. And then, inside, the house quiets. Sleep should be a relief. But in the Victorian world, even sleep is uncertain. Your bedroom is cold, always. The fire doesn't reach this far. Your breath fogs in the air. The sheets are stiff. The mattress creaks. And beneath it, dust, maybe rats, maybe worse. Your bed is not a plush retreat. It is an obligation. You must sleep correctly, on your back, hands folded, hair pinned. If you die in the night, you must look peaceful for the morning. Privacy? Unlikely. You may share a room, or a wall so thin you hear everything. Prayers, arguments, sobs. And if you're in the servant class, you sleep in the attic, or in the basement, or under the stairs, cramped, drafty, and alone. A blanket, maybe two. And your dreams are the only escape you're allowed. Except, dreams betray you too. They might bring visions of a deceased child, or a suitor who never returned from war. You wake with tears in your eyes and no one to notice. Worse still, you might not wake at all, because death comes at night, silently, often. You go to bed with a sore throat and never get up again. You cough into your handkerchief and find blood. You feel a fever rise and know, deep down, you won't see another spring. And if that isn't terrifying enough, there's fire, gas leaks, candles tipped over, chimney sparks. Entire families have perished in minutes because someone left an ember too close to a rug. The smoke would wake no one. The heat would build. And by the time the screams began, it was already too late. So you go to bed with dread. You double-check the hearth. You bolt the doors. You whisper prayers. And still, you are not safe. If death doesn't take you, nightmares might. You dream of debt collectors, unpaid rent, and the workhouse. You dream of your child catching cold, of the doctor saying there's nothing to be done, of the undertaker measuring your infant with silent efficiency. You dream of a future where you are forgotten, where you lived correctly, modestly, obediently, and still ended up alone. And yet, there is one moment, one small comfort. Lying in bed, wrapped in blankets rough but warm, the fire long dead, but your breath slow, the outside world finally, completely silent. You close your eyes, and maybe, just maybe, some part of you believes that tomorrow might be different, that someone will remember you, that the letter you wrote today might reach the right hands, that the glance exchanged at the dance meant something. Because even in darkness, Victorians hope, they fear. Yes, but they also believe that ghosts visit, that dreams hold meaning, that love can survive 1,000 rules and even 12 fevers. And so you sleep, not easily, not safely, but deeply. Because you must, because morning will come, because love, like death, never waits forever. You've survived the day, now let it fade. The fire is ashes now. The boots are by the door, stiff and silent. The corset lies coiled on the chair like a defeated snake. The candles have burned low. The gaslight flickers its last breath. And you've made it through another day in the Victorian world. Not gracefully, not easily, but completely. You did what was expected. You rose early. You suffered the cold, the corsets, the cracked hands, and the cold toast. You played your role in a society where everyone is assigned a part from birth, and stepping off the stage, even for a moment, is scandalous. And yet, you did it. You woke in that stiff horsehair bed, shivering and blinking at a ceiling painted in cracks. You dressed in layers of etiquette, pinned your hair with patience, and walked out into a day ruled by ritual. You labored. You obeyed. You smiled when you were meant to smile. And even when your stomach grumbled through a flavorless meal and your body ached from bending and serving and holding it all in, you still managed to look someone in the eye and feel something real. You remembered to care. And somehow, that was the most dangerous thing of all. Because in the Victorian world, to love is to risk everything. It's to whisper in a world built to stay silent. It's to soften in a world designed to keep you hard and cold and upright and appropriate. But that's what makes it powerful. You've seen what this era really is. Not the paintings, not the polished floors, not the dusty novels filled with long, aching glances in flower-filled gardens. You've seen the soot-streaked fingers, the cracked teacups, the child coughing in a damp room. You've tasted the bread gone stale. You've heard the screams swallowed into pillows. You've watched women hold back tears with smiles and men carry grief in the set of their jaw. You've learned that nothing is as clean or elegant as it seems, that behind every chaperoned dance is a mother counting dowries, that behind every gloved handshake is someone wondering if they'll still have a roof by next month. But even here, in this place of constant pressure and expectation, something survives. Affection. small, trembling, forbidden. It lives in letters smudged with ink and yearning. It lives in flowers pressed between pages of books never finished. It lives in the hope that someone, somewhere, might see you, might truly see you. Not for your rank, your lineage, your ability to balance a teacup on your knee, but for who you are beneath all that fabric and fear. So tonight, as the cold slips beneath the door and the city begins to truly sleep, let it all go. Let the gaslights fade. Let the coal fires burn down. Let the city streets empty of footsteps and the bells grow silent. You're warm now, at last. There's no corset, no bonnet, no rules. Just you, just the sound of your breath, the softness of your blanket, the hum of whatever modern comfort surrounds you. Close your eyes. Because tomorrow you won't have to rise to stoke the fire. You won't have to lace up anything tight. You won't have to whisper in code, or bow your head, or nod along to someone else's idea of virtue. You live now, in a world with central heating, with antibiotics, with dental hygiene, with choice. And for all the romance and nostalgia that the Victorian era offers, don't forget what it cost to live there. Hardship, loss, silence, struggle. So tonight, as you drift off, remember, you don't have to wake up in 1885. You don't have to smile through a mouthful of laudanum. You don't have to pin a lock of hair to your chest and pretend it's enough. You get to rest, to breathe, to want, to love, freely, fully, without permission. So sleep now, and sleep well, because this world, the one you woke in, is kinder. It may not be perfect, but it is yours, and it is warm.